Gemini else, you guys are not going to believe what I'm about to tell you, and honestly, even as I say it out loud, it still feels like a nightmare I haven't woken up from. My own family, my flesh and blood, abandoned my little girl, my precious daughter, at a homeless shelter because they claimed they didn't have space for her. Can you even imagine that? Was I wrong for cutting every single one of them out of my life after this? Tell me truly, what would you have done if your family had done something so monstrous to your child? It all started about 2 years ago, right after Sarah, my daughter, turned 7. Her father, my ex-husband Mark, had always been a bit of a free spirit, and by free spirit, I mean he was chronically unreliable and consistently chose his next adventure over his responsibilities. He'd been in and out of Sarah's life since she was a toddler, promising the world and delivering very little. This particular time, he'd gotten himself into some serious legal trouble, entirely self-inflicted, of course, and was facing a pretty lengthy prison sentence. The timing couldn't have been worse for me. I was deployed overseas with the military. I'd been serving for almost 10 years by then, and while it was tough being away from Sarah, I knew she was safe with Mark's mother, Brenda, who had always been a steady presence in Sarah's life. Even if Mark wasn't, Brenda was Sarah's paternal grandmother, a sweet, soft-spoken woman who adored Sarah. Or so I thought. When Mark's legal issues escalated, Brenda called me, absolutely distraught. She explained that she was struggling to cope with everything. Mark's impending incarceration, the stress of dealing with lawyers, and her own health issues, which had recently flared up, meant she couldn't take care of Sarah any more. My heart sank. I was thousands of miles away in a war zone, and suddenly my little girl needed a place to go. I immediately thought of my own family. I have a sister, Jessica, who is 3 years older than me, and a brother, David, who is 5 years younger. We grew up relatively close, or so I believed. My parents, Susan and Robert, had always presented themselves as loving, supportive figures, especially when it came to family. I called my mom first, explained the situation, and asked if Sarah could stay with them. I emphasized it would only be for a few months, until my deployment ended, and I could come home and get everything sorted. I even offered to send money every month to cover any expenses. My mom, Susan, sounded hesitant. She said, "Oh, honey, that's such a difficult situation, but we just don't have the space here. You know how small this house is, and with your father's new hobby taking up the spare room, it's just not feasible." I was confused. No space. I asked, "Mom, Sarah is 7. She could sleep on the couch, or you could put a cot in your room. It's temporary." But she was firm. "No, darling, it just won't work." My heart ached, but I tried to understand. Maybe their house really was too full. I didn't want to cause them any inconvenience, so I called my sister, Jessica. Jessica has 2 children of her own, who are a few years older than Sarah, and a large, 4-bedroom house. I figured she would be more understanding. I explained everything to her, the urgent need for a temporary home for Sarah, the deployment Mark's situation. Jessica listened patiently, and then she sighed. "Look, I love Sarah, you know I do. But with my kids and all their activities and my husband's work schedule, our house is just chaotic enough already. Adding another child, even for a few months, would just push us over the edge. I'm so sorry, sis. I wish I could, but it's just not the right time. Another rejection." I felt a cold dread creeping in. My own sister, with space and resources, also couldn't take her niece in for a few months. I felt a pang of betrayal, but I pushed it down. Maybe I was asking too much. Finally, I called my brother, David. David lives alone in a decent-sized apartment and has no children. He's always been the quiet one, a bit detached, but I thought he'd at least offer to help. I laid out the whole situation, desperate now. His response was clipped. "Nah, I can't. My place is barely big enough for me and my gaming setup. Plus, I don't know anything about kids. It would be a disaster." I was stunned. "David, she's 7. She just needs a roof over her head and someone to watch her. I'll send money, I promise." But he was unwavering. "No, sorry, can't do it." At this point, I was truly panicking. I had exhausted all my immediate family options. Brenda was calling me daily, her voice becoming more strained, telling me she couldn't hold on much longer. I even reached out to a few aunts and uncles, distant cousins, anyone I could think of, but got similar responses: no space, too busy, not equipped for children. My command sensed my distress, and my superior officer tried to help me navigate the situation from afar, but there was only so much they could do. They advised me to look into social services, but I was terrified of Sarah ending up in foster care. I felt like a complete failure, stuck thousands of miles away, unable to protect my child. Brenda called me again, her voice cracking with tears. She said she had reached her absolute limit. She told me she had contacted a local homeless shelter that had a family program. My heart seized in my chest. A homeless shelter for my daughter. I pleaded with her, "Brenda, please no, don't do that. Give me more time. I'll figure something out." But she was beyond reasoning. She said she had no other choice. She was feeling unwell, and she had to be admitted to the hospital that very day. She promised me the shelter was safe, that they had resources for children, and that it was only temporary. I felt like I was going to throw up. I told her to send me the shelter's information immediately. I called them, spoke to a kind caseworker, and explained I was her mother, deployed, and would be back as soon as humanly possible to get my daughter. They assured me they would take care of her. The next few months were a blur of unimaginable guilt and relentless effort to get home. I pulled every string, navigated endless bureaucratic hurdles, and finally, after what felt like an eternity, I secured an early return from deployment due to extreme family hardship. The moment my boots touched American soil, I was on the first flight to the city where the shelter was located. My heart was pounding, a mixture of fear, relief, and a burning anger I hadn't allowed myself to fully acknowledge until then. I walked into that shelter, a place I never in a million years imagined my daughter would be, and saw her. My beautiful, resilient Sarah. She looked smaller, a little thinner, but her eyes lit up when she saw me. We hugged for what felt like an hour, tears streaming down both our faces. It was the most heartbreaking reunion of my life. She told me about the other children, about the games they played, about how the staff were kind. She described sharing a room with other families, the constant noise, and the feeling of never truly being alone. No child should ever have to experience that, let alone my child, whose family had houses and comfortable beds. After getting Sarah settled with me in a temporary apartment, I called my mom. I didn't yell. My voice was dangerously calm. "Mom," I said, "do you know where Sarah was for the last 3 months?" There was a pause. Well, with Brenda, right, until she couldn't any more. "No, Mom," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Sarah was living in a homeless shelter. My own daughter in a homeless shelter because you, Jessica, and David all said you had no space for her. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then my mom started to stammer, making excuses about how they didn't realize it would come to that, how they thought Brenda would figure something else out. "You didn't realize. I cut her off. I begged you. I told you it was urgent. You all knew my situation. You abandoned her." I hung up before she could respond further. Then I called Jessica. Her reaction was even worse. She became defensive, saying I was being dramatic, that it wasn't her responsibility, and that I should have had a better plan before deploying. My blood ran cold. My plan was my family, Jessica. My plan was that you would never let your niece end up in a homeless shelter. And with David, it was the same detached indifference. He simply said, "Well, she's with you now, right, so what's the big deal?" So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have forgiven them? Would you have tried to mend those broken family ties? Or would you have walked away from people who could do something so unthinkable? My decision was swift and absolute. I cut them all out of my life, every single one of them, my parents, my sister, my brother. I changed my phone number, blocked them on social media, and made it clear to any mutual acquaintances that I wanted no contact. They tried to reach out at first, sending texts, emails, even showing up at my apartment once, which I promptly reported to the building management. They tried to use guilt, saying I was depriving them of their grandchild. You already did that. I texted back to my mom, the last message I ever sent her. When you left her at a shelter, you gave up any right to her. The anger still burns, but it's a controlled fire now, one that fuels my determination to protect Sarah and build a new, stronger family unit for us. Sarah is thriving now. She's in a wonderful school, has made new friends, and is slowly starting to forget the trauma of those months. We talk about it sometimes, openly and honestly, and she knows she is loved and safe with me. We have a small, close circle of friends who have become our chosen family, people who truly understand the meaning of support and unconditional love. Brenda, Sarah's paternal grandmother, surprisingly, has been the only one to express genuine remorse. She visited Sarah at the shelter multiple times and has tried to explain her actions, describing her own health crisis and feeling utterly overwhelmed and alone. While I haven't fully forgiven her, I've allowed a very limited, supervised contact between her and Sarah, because Sarah missed her, and Brenda genuinely seems to regret her decision, unlike my own. Family, my biological family, however, has never once truly apologized or even acknowledged the profound damage they caused. They live in their own world of self-justification, and I simply cannot have that toxicity near my daughter or myself. This experience taught me a profound lesson about what family truly means. It's not just about blood. It's about loyalty, love, and showing up when it matters most. It's about protecting the vulnerable, especially a child. So no, I don't regret my decision to walk away from them. I regret that it ever had to come to this, that my daughter had to endure such a thing at the hands of people who should have loved her unconditionally. But I had to protect her, and sometimes protection means drawing the hardest lines.